Hello, welcome to another episode of Sewing in Scripture. Today we are going to be concluding the book of Esther in chapters 9 and 10. And I'm going to warn you right now, there's going to be a whole lot of names in here that I'm going to butcher. I'm going to try my best, but they're not going to be perfect because there's about 3 verses where it's nothing but names. Because Haman had 10 sons, and it took up 3 verses to name out all of his sons that were killed. So I'm just warning you right now. I'm going to be trying to pronounce these names, but I'm not going to claim to be an expert at it. So just know I'm doing my best. Give me a little bit of grace. Thanks. So again, we're going to go through the book of Esther, chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 10 is only 3 verses long, so we're just tacking it on to the end of chapter 9 just because it's just easier that way instead of doing a whole video just for 10. I think that would be like maybe a 2-minute video. So we're going to just keep it all together. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch a testimony from our sponsor. And while that's playing, go ahead and use that opportunity to get into your Bible app or grab your physical Bible and look up the book of Esther to follow along, chapter 9. And we'll be right back. So I was just at the grocery store and I was at the checkout, and the lady, the cashier behind the register, stopped me. And she said, "Oh my gosh." She goes, "I have to tell you something." Okay. She said 20 years ago, she went to a church, and she didn't know Jesus at the time. She didn't know anything about, she knew the basics that most people have an idea about, but she really didn't know God. And she said that she was praying, she was walking through the church and she was praying, "God, please show me a sign that there's somebody out there for me, that I belong somewhere." And she said she rounded the corner and she had this vision. She was shown this. 20 years ago, she saw this. Now, this is, I designed this not too long ago, like within the past 5 months. But she said that was the image I saw. And God was telling me, "I am the Lion of Judah. And there is someone for everyone. I am for everyone." And she felt just so compelled that she had to come up and share that story with me about how she found God and how she has found peace through Christ, just having the knowledge that God is the Lion of Judah, that this is the Lion of Judah, that this is the Lion and the Lamb. It's all about God. It's all about Christ. It's all about Him, and He is for everyone. We are not alone. And that just really hit me. So once again, that's foxthepatriot.com. Please go ahead and support our sponsor, because they do support the channel and they keep us running for right now. Hopefully we'll get enough subscribers in the future and we won't have to rely so heavily on them. But right now, foxthepatriot.com, go ahead and give them a check out so that they can help keep us running. Also, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and don't forget that notification bell. It doesn't matter if you're subscribed or you like it. If you're not hitting that notification bell, YouTube is not going to tell you when these videos come out. So be sure to hit that notification bell and make sure you're selecting for all videos, not just for what they're recommending. So make sure your selections are correct in your notifications. Finally, let me know you've been here. That like button is great, but leave me a comment too. You'll say, "Hey, great job, loved it," or, "I think you could do something better. Let's work on it." Whatever. Just leave me a comment. Let me know you're here, even if it's just a "Hey, hi, how you doing?" So let's go ahead and get into Esther chapter 9. And as usual, we're going to go ahead and start with a recap of what we've learned so far in this chapter. So Esther was made queen after Vashti's banishment. Mordecai overhears a plot to assassinate the king and tells Esther. Mordecai's name is written in the king's chronicles as someone deserving of reward. Haman is given honor, but Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. Haman convinces the king that there are people in the empire who need to be exterminated, and is given the king's signet ring to initiate this process. Mordecai asks Esther to go to the king and beg for the lives of her people. Haman is then forced to honor Mordecai because of the previous time when he was deserving of reward. Esther invites the king and Haman to 2 banquets. Haman plans the murder of Mordecai, but then later realizes that's probably not the best idea because he just got done having to honor Mordecai. Esther exposes Haman's plans to the king, and Haman is executed. Now, let's remember Haman erected the very thing that was the tool for his own execution. So he was so blinded by hate and rage towards Mordecai, he actually let it lead him to his own destruction. Mordecai is given Haman's estate and the king's signet ring to begin writing counter decrees to save the Jews. Now, Mordecai, he was placed in charge of all of the estates. He wasn't just given the estate. The estate was given to Esther, and she placed Mordecai in charge of Haman's estates. So just to clarify that. So let's go ahead and jump into chapter 9. This is after the king has given the signet ring to Mordecai to write out these counter decrees in an effort to save the Jews. The Jews have now started building up their defenses against their enemies, and they are getting ready to basically go to war if necessary. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. So you got to remember, there's people in the kingdom who still, just because there's a decree saying, we're not going through with this, you need to just not do this, and the Jews are going to be allowed to fight for themselves. There were still people in the kingdom who were like, oh, I'm all about it. Like, there was that other decree, and that's the decree we're going to follow. We don't care about this counter decree. So that's where we're at. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. So Mordecai is in a position of high power. So I'm not going to go against him. The fateful day was March 7th, 473 BC. The tables were turned was an obvious reference to the providence of God, even though the name of God does not appear. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspata, Purata, Adelia, Aridata, Parmashta, Erishai, Eridai, and Bezata, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So, what did you think of my pronunciations? I was very tongue-tied there. I'm so sorry. Many of the Persian citizens took full advantage of the first decree to attack their Jewish neighbors. They did what they pleased, indicates that the Jews were given a free hand without official interference. So Xerxes is like, there's the decree and there's the counter decree. And I'm standing by that counter decree because it came second. Whatever the Jews need to do to defend themselves, have at it. I'm not getting in the way. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder, indicates the purity of their motives, which is evident to all. So they had the right to go into their enemies' homes and take whatever they wanted. Like they had the right to plunder that. With the decree even said, you can kill them and take what is theirs. But the Jews were like, we don't care about that plunder. We just want to be left alone. We will go as far as we have to, as far as necessary, but no further. And that is a little excessive. We don't need that. So they just left the plunder behind. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? It will also be granted. So the king is still like, tell me more. What do you want? If it pleases the king, Esther answered, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles." So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. Now you're saying, why did they impale the sons of Haman now? Because they already said that they killed them. Well, they're putting their bodies out on display, basically. So again, if you're reading from the King James Version, it would say that they were strung up on the gallows. But again, the whole point is they're making a display of Haman's descendants. They're saying, look what happens when you try to usurp the king and take his power, and when you hate so badly that you cause the destruction of your very own family. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. So again, they're not interested in the money. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. So again, she's asking for 2 days. She said, today went great, but I'm asking for permission for tomorrow also. And why would that be? Well, because the enemies of the Jews were still going to be coming for them the next day. It's not like they wiped everybody out in one day. It wasn't one fell swoop. It was, we still need the right to be able to defend ourselves past today, because there might be more coming. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in the villages, observed the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. So rural Jews celebrating their victory on the 14th day of Adar, while Jews in Susa waited until the 15th. Eventually, Mordecai ordered that both days should be observed annually as the feast of Purim. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar. As the time went, the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month went, their sorrow was turned into joy, and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote to them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents to food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the poor, that is the lot, for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had devised against the Jews should come back into on his own head, and that he and his sons should be impaled on poles. Therefore, these days were called Purim, from the word pur, because of everything written in this letter, and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them. The Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who joined them should without fail observe these 2 days every year, in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family, and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. These verses contain the third account of the institution of the feast and explain how it got its name, Purim. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, words of goodwill and assurance, to establish these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed for them, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. So, that was the establishment of the Jewish holiday Purim. And it's basically a way of celebrating. They tried to come and kill us, but we got the better of them, right? You tried to kill us, but we survived. You know, you kind of, you lose. You lose, God wins every time. That is the crux of it. You can come against God's people, but in the end we're going to win. So that is chapter 9. So let's go on to chapter 10. This is just these 3 little verses, and it's all about Mordecai. So chapter 10, Book of Esther. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted. Are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai, the Jew, was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Mordecai held the office of first minister for no longer than 8 years. Secular history records that another man was in that office in 465 BC. So it wasn't like a lifelong position that he held. He was only there for a certain amount of time, but during that period of time, he held a great amount of power. And if you think about it, this is almost a little reminiscent of like when Pharaoh gave Joseph the position of being in charge of the food stores. So you see that God has a way of taking his people and placing them in positions where they do become elevated, even if it's for a short period of time in their life. They become elevated to a point where they have enough power to have a great impact on his people and to be beneficial to them. And that's kind of what he did with Esther too. He took her, she was just, an everyday person, basically, taken into the palace, elevated to the position of queen. For what? So that she could fulfill her purpose that God had made for her, to be an advocate for the Jewish people with the king, and to help her demonstrate her faith in God and his will for her life. So, are you currently struggling with something like that in your own life, where God's calling you to do something and you're really just hesitant to do it? Now might be the time. Take that leap of faith. Walk out in faith. Trust God. Trust his plan. You do have a calling. Sometimes you just have to listen. So, again, this has been the Book of Esther. We've gone through all 10 chapters together, and I hope you enjoyed this Bible study. Again, please go ahead and give this a share to anybody that you think may enjoy it, or just to anybody who, in general, you never know who really needs a word from God today. It could just be somebody random that you run into or talk to. You just don't know who you could be impacting when you share the word of God with others. So that'll be it for today. Again, don't forget to visit our sponsor, foxthepatriot.com. They do support us and keep us running for now. So again, thank you for joining us. And I haven't decided what our next series will be yet, but as soon as I know, you'll know. Have a great and wonderful and blessed day.